Javai Amapulat Dilanawan. Welcome to Ita See the World. Traditional tattoo is one of the cultural practice among the indigenous peoples all over the world. And nowadays, many countries, including Taiwan, are on the process of reviving the traditional tattooing culture. And this is an art form that doesn't use machine. Instead, it just uses the traditional handmade tool to tap the natural ink into the skin. So today we are very honored to have our special guest from Hawaii. He is a well-known native Hawaiian tattoo master, Keone Nunes. So today he is gonna share with us about his journey and how he's gonna pass on this knowledge to the next generation. So aloha, Keone.
Hi, aloha.
And first, can you say hi to our audience first and briefly introduce yourself?
Yes. Aloha mai kako. Oau ho'i o Keone Nunes mai waenai mai hiki I Thailand hiki manawa. No laila haoli ana wau no ka noho pu me oko no ka walau pu me oko e pili ana ki mau mea he nui. My name is Keone Nunes. I'm originally from Waianae, Hawaii, but currently live in Thailand. And I'm very, very honored to sit and talk to all of you about this very important cultural practice.
Thank you so much. And as a very important advocate for the Hawaiian traditional tattoo, we really want to know what inspired you to start this journey?
It was really interesting because I never thought that I would be a tattooist. But when I was younger, I would like to spend a lot of time with elders. And they would share a lot of things because I could speak Hawaiian, and they would share a lot of stories and a lot of cultural practices. As I got older, I started doing different things within the culture, one of which was that I started teaching hula, Hawaiian dance for men. And we were getting ready for a competition, and I had remembered some of the things that a relative of mine had told me about Hawaiian tattooing, about the practice, about the designs, all of that. Then I remembered other elders telling me small things about designs, what it meant, and whose family it was from, and all of that. And so I was thinking, since we're getting ready for a hula competition, why don't I try and mark my own body, and I could draw the designs on other people who were dancing for me. And so I sought out a tattooist that was willing to do the protocols that was necessary, traditional protocols. And in that process, I was informed that there were no one really practicing traditional tattooing anymore. And so that got me thinking, and they encouraged me to actually do tattooing because I was pretty good with my hands, and I knew the protocols, I knew the designs, and I knew the genealogies. And so that's how I started.
So in your childhood, and who teach you all these protocols or the culture of native Hawaiian, and in your educational stage?
Yeah. I think it started with my grandfather and my uncle who taught me Hawaiian when I was small. It was interesting because I'm actually half Japanese, and I was born in Japan. And when I came to Hawaii, back to the family of my father, I couldn't speak English, and so they spoke to me in Hawaiian. And so I was very fortunate because there were very few people in my generation that actually had that opportunity. And so I think it started with that, and throughout the course of my growing up, I had very good role models, teachers, both in primary school, elementary school, into high school and college. And so I learned a lot from that, but I actually learned more outside of formal education, in speaking with elders, in speaking with people who were born around the turn of the century, and even some that was born before that. This one gentleman I spoke with was when I was in my 20s. He was in his 90s. When he was in his 20s, he spoke to a person who was nearly 100, who was actually born during the time of Kamehameha I, Kamehameha Kunuiakea. So in the span of 2.5 lifetimes, we went from a chiefdom of Kamehameha all the way until what is now known as modern Hawaii. So we're very fortunate that we cycled real quickly. There was still some really deep knowledge that was hidden within families. But I was fortunate enough to, take advantage of that when I was younger. I would go speak with elders instead of going out to the nightclubs. To me, that was more exciting. Yeah. And so at that time, a lot of people thought I was missing out on my youth.
But you don't think that way?
No, I didn't think that way. But as I have gotten older, the same people tell me that I was fortunate, I was smart to do that. So, yeah.
So you got the opportunities that in your generation that not many people have the opportunity as well. Right?
I think they had the opportunity, they didn't take advantage of it.
They didn't choose
they didn't choose
doing that
go,
way. Yeah. Okay, so since like 1996, you start the traditional tattooing styles.
Yeah.
And can you share about this journey? Like, who is your master?
Yeah.
And teach you all this like traditional tattooing techniques?
Yeah. Well, I actually started in 1990, but I started with machine, and the reason why I started with machine was that there was no one doing traditional methods at that time. And so I started with a machine. And there was this gentleman from Holland, his name is Henk Schiffmacher, who came to Hawaii and was doing a documentary about tattooing around the world. He had heard about me, and so he wanted to film me. And he's a very well-known tattooist in Europe. And as he was filming me, he said, "Oh, you're very good at what you do." And I didn't know who he was, so I just said, "Oh, thank you." And he asked me if I knew about the cultural part and all that. And I said, "Yeah, I do." And I talked to him a little bit about that. He told me that he was going to New Zealand, where a Samoan tattooist, who was arguably the best tattooist of his generation, Suluape Paulo, lived. And he said, "Would it be okay if I mention your name to him?" I said, "Yeah, of course." A while later, I get a phone call. At that time, we didn't have cell phones, right? So the phones were pretty loud. And so I got a phone call at about 10 or 11 at night. And I picked it up, and it was Paulo. And he said he heard about me from Hank, and he wanted to meet me. And so we started to talk. And he said that he was going to go to Samoa later, and he would arrange for me to go with him. But I had to go to New Zealand and spend some time at his house first. And so I did. And that's how my journey on traditional tattooing started. and that was in 1996.
So you started from the machinery tattooing, right? So how many years of the machinery tattoo?
Probably about 6 years.
6 years.
But I never did anything outside of Hawaiian designs, because my whole thing was I didn't want to be a tattooist. I wanted to perpetuate the Hawaiian tradition of tattoo, which is a different way of thinking about things. Yeah, and so I always stuck with doing Hawaiian designs for about 6 years. Yeah.
So after you learn from the Suruape Pauro, you starting to make the traditional tools, right?
Yes.
Can you share with us the process?
Well, what happened was when we was in Samoa, he actually, I think he was waiting for me, because I passed his hotel room and his door was open and he was making tools. And he looked up and he said, "Oh, Keone, come in." So I came in and he said, "Sit down and watch a little bit." So I was watching him, and then I was asking questions, and then he told me, "You want to try and make one?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So he told me what to do. He gave me the materials. I went back in my room, and I didn't sleep for a day. I just worked on it, and I finished it. I was very excited, so I waited in front of his hotel door until he opened the door, and he saw I was there. And he was surprised, and I said, "Yeah, I'm finished. I want you to look at it." So he looked at it, and he said, "Oh, this is pretty good." Then he put it in his rack of tools. And I was like, "Oh, geez, that's my first tool." And he took it from me. Then he gave me materials and told me to make another. And so I did that. And the next day, I showed it to him. He looked at it. He said, "This is very good. The only thing is missing is that it needs somebody to use it. Do you mind if I teach you how to tattoo?" And that's how I started learning.
So at that moment, you become the students.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how many years you learn from him?
From Paulo?
Yeah.
That's a hard question, because physically I've learned from him from 96 until he died in November of 99. So about 3 years, yeah. But I still feel that he teaches me. I still feel that there are times where I would ask a question in my mind, then all of a sudden the answer would be shown to me. So, it might sound funny, but I still think that he teaches me. Yeah.
And you also inherit his tools, right?
He gave me a set of tools that I still have. So they teach my new tools how to work. Yeah. They teach my tools how to tattoo. Yeah. And 1 year after he died, his family asked if I would take his name as a title. Yeah. And so I do have a title name as a chiefly tattooist of Suluape. Yeah.
So when elders and families sees you doing the revitalization of Hawaiian traditional tattoo, what do they think?
Well, at first, they would challenge me as far as that's concerned. When I first got tattooed in '89, some elders would look at me and say, "Oh, what does it mean?" And when I told them what it meant, then they were happy, because there are a lot of people just doing tattoos just because they look nice and not knowing what it meant. And so they were very happy that I knew what it meant. Yeah, and they were very supportive after that. It was interesting. The elders were more supportive than the people in my generation. The people in my generation thought I was crazy, and that I would never get a job because I had
of
a
the tattoo.
Yeah, but that's never been a problem, and even till now, I've done facial tattoos. I've done tattoos on people who are federal judges, mayors of different islands. I've done one for priests. I've done some for teachers, for principals, and some of them facial tattoos. And so it's gone from you're crazy, you shouldn't do that, to being very, very accepted.
So there's a transformation.
Yeah, there was a big transformation, but it's taken a while. It's taken 30 years. Yeah.
30 years, 3 decades.
Yeah, 3 decades.
So when you're trying to like find or revival the traditional tattoo, you have to like study and do the research, right? And also asking the elders about their knowledge. So in the process, did you encounter any challenges?
I think the challenge is that in Hawaii, we didn't have that much written about tattoos as far as written sources. And so the majority of what I've learned and what I perpetuate are from oral sources. Yeah. And for some academicians, that is not enough for them. Yeah. But I think that it's fairly racist when you think about it. Because if a brown person tells a white person who puts it in a book, then it's fine. But if a brown person tells another brown person who tells another brown person who actually does the work, then it's not. That, to me, that doesn't sound right. That's saying that everything has to go through a white educational system in order to be valid. And I don't think that that's true. Yeah.
So you you get this knowledge from the elders and through the oral stories.
Right. A lot of it.
A lot of it.
There's some research that I've done, but the majority of what I know is from them. Yeah.
So how many elders know about this traditional tattooing culture?
There were 5 elders that were my primary informants. Yeah. One was a blood relative of mine, Auntie Miro Lupinui. Another was Papa Kala Hikiola Nalielua. The other one was Auntie Emma DeFries. I had another one from the island of Hawaii, who was the mother of Johnny Lumho, who used to be a noted hula teacher, Auntie Martha Lumho, and Arthur Cathcart. Those were the 5 primary ones, and all of them shared one thing. They all grew up in the countryside. They were not in Honolulu. And the majority of them were born around the turn of the century. So it was a time of change. It was going from a more rural type of existence into a more city type of existence that you know of now as Hawaii.
And as we know that not every elders were willing to share their knowledge to no matter other people from outside or the next generation, unless they are willing to listen to them, right?
Right. You know, and that's why I think being able to speak Hawaiian was very important. Yeah. To be able to speak your own native language. The older people feel comfortable, and if you don't speak the language, then they don't feel comfortable in sharing everything because they're not comfortable in the language that comes, that comes from someplace else, from colonizers. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you mentioned about your traditional tattooing tools.
Yes.
Can you show us some of your traditional tools and introduce what's the material or how you make them?
Yeah, so this I put a cover over the bowl so that when I put the ink in, it doesn't cross-contaminate. Yeah, but I'll take this off.
So is the place to put the ink, natural ink?
Yes, yes. This is, and I can show you later. But this is the bowl, and it's made from traditional stone. And this one was actually made by a relative of mine, and he gave it to me. Yeah. These are the tools. This was from a student of mine who I helped teach tool making, who's actually Filipino, and he makes very, very good tools. Yeah. The materials are bird bones, and the large one, this one is hippopotamus. Yeah. This is hippopotamus tusk.
And what is called in Hawaiian? The
tool?
name, yeah, the tool.
The tool is called moli, and that's from the moli, the bird bone, the bird that we use to make the tools out of. That's the albatross. Yeah. So this is called a moli. Yeah. And I have different sizes and all of that. This is the last one that I made in about 2003 about. Yeah. And it's still good and still works real well. This is the first one that I made, and it's been redone by one of my students. He made a new handle for me and all that. But this one I did in 1996. So if you take care of your tools, it'll last a long time.
Yeah, it lasts a long time.
Yeah, it's older than you.
Yeah, it's older than me.
Yeah.
So how about the tattoo word in Hawaiian? How do you say that?
The Hawaiian, the word for actually doing the tattoo is the same throughout Polynesia. It's kakao o tatao, yeah, or tattoo. The word for the tattoo, the design that remains, is called uhi for us.
Uhi.
Uhi. And the tattoo tool in New Zealand is called uhi. Yeah. So there is a similarity in the language as far as that's concerned. Yeah.
And then and when we talk about the traditional tools, I would like to ask what's the importance of the tools for you, because you have to build some connection with the tools, right?
Yeah, part of it is that you make the tools. It takes a long time to make the tools. Nowadays, there are a lot of people that use metal. And personally for me, I don't like to use metal because the tattoo comes out looking differently. And the relationship that you have with the tools is not built up. So after I make the tools, it might take anywhere from 1 or 2 days to 1 or 2 weeks to make a tool. After I do that, I take it down to the ocean and wake up the tools.
Wake up the tools?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a ceremony?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. But for us, the tools are the connection to our ancestors. And the tools are something that give the individual what we call mana, which is like more of a spiritual power. Yeah. And so that's why tools are very important for us. Yeah. So there's always a connection. So the oldest tool that I have in here in 1996, this one, teaches the others how to tattoo. Yeah. And so it's a different way of looking at things. You know, if you look at any craftsman, they have their favorite tools. If you look at a wood carver, they have a chisel or a mallet that's their favorite. And because they have a relationship with it. It's the same with these. Yeah.
Okay, so is there any like rituals or ceremony before you're doing the tattooing?
Well, one of the rituals is waking up the tools.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then after that, before I tattoo, at least a couple days before I tattoo, I don't drink any alcohol or anything like that to clean the body, yeah, and the mind. So that's part of it. When I wake up the tools, usually if I'm in Hawaii or someplace like that, I'll wake up at about 2 o'clock in the morning to wake up the tools. And if I'm not in Hawaii, I'll bring Hawaiian salt with me and mix it with water and wake up the tools that way. So there's always a connection to the ocean, yeah. Because that's where all of us come from, regardless of what indigenous group we're from. Like you're in Taiwan, it's an island,
Yeah.
and you had to come from the ocean to get here, yeah. So all of us have that connection, the ocean, and so I think it's important to recognize that, yeah. But then after that, I put the ink in and say a prayer to the ink. Because for us, the god of tattooing is Kanehikili. And so when I wake up these tools, I say that they're going to start to do the work of Kanehikili. When I pray over the ink, it's for Kanehikili to empower the ink to give the individual what they need. Yeah, so that's all part of it.
We can see the process as a traditional tattooist. You have to prepare yourself.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I would like to ask that in the ancient times, does every Hawaiians have tattoo?
A lot of Hawaiians had tattoos traditionally. The more tattoo that you had, the higher ranking you were, because it took time for you to heal from the tattoo. So the time that it took, you had to have somebody take care of whatever you did. Yeah. So you had to be fairly high ranking in order to do that. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, one of the highest ranking individuals was tattooed half his body. His name was Kahikili. And so that showed the extent of how much tattoos were prized back in traditional times. Yeah.
So in Taiwan, in Paiwan tribe, when you want to get the traditional tattoo patterns, and you have to discussion with the family, with the whole family, and to get the consent from the family, and also do the ceremony, the blessing, and after that the tattooist can do the work. So in Hawaii, is there any similar process?
It's very similar. You know, oftentimes they do have to go and get to talk to their family, and for us, what's important is that if they have any huki or any disagreements within the family, like if I'm your brother and you're my sister and you did something and I got angry at you and I didn't talk to you for a while and you wanted a tattoo, then you would come to me and ask for, in Hawaiian, mihi sort of means to apologize, sort of, but not quite, you know, because it's not one way. In other words, if you apologize to me, if you mihi to me, it's not like you're apologizing. If you mihi to me, you're acknowledging some things that were done, but I have to acknowledge my reaction to you. So it's two ways, yeah. And so if there is that type of huki within a family, I tell them to start that process. It might not finish before the time that they get the tattoo, but at least the process is started to get a little unification in the family. Yeah.
So is there any specific tattoo is for the higher stages?
Yeah. There are certain designs that I wouldn't do on people that are not from that family. Yeah. I know in Taiwan there are certain designs for higher royalty and lower royalty and all of that. We have similar, but it's not so much royal lineages, but family designs, and where you're from and who gets the type of designs that is worthy of, because it's a little bit different if you're high ranking and we're brother sister and I'm high ranking. You have different abilities than me. Yeah. So maybe your ability was for healing and my ability was for fishing. Yeah. So that would determine things. The family tattoos would be, the patterns would be similar, but it would be different because you're a healer and I'm a fisherman. Yeah.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I would like to know that, is there any difference between men and women's tattoos? Or different parts of the body? Yeah,
there are some differences. Oftentimes women get tattooed around the breast to give the baby mana. Yeah, spiritual power as they feed. Yeah. And also women sometimes have tattoos on the inner part of the thigh, like that, to because it'll, again, this is all for the child, to give the child mana as the child is born, because it travels the path of the tattoo. Yeah.
How about the men's tattoo?
The men's tattoo is more for protection. Yeah, more for protection, more to indicate their genealogy. Not necessarily this is me and there and all of that. It's like my family were warriors, and the genealogy of that family comes from Maui, and so that's the design that is placed on them. Yeah.
We can saw the difference between different roles, different role in the ancient society.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and we also can see there's a lot of like sacred ceremony.
Yeah.
When you want to get a tattoo. Yeah. So thank you so much, and we will take a break, and then we'll back to the show.